Welcome back. Double season here. Make no mistake about that. We are all awaiting September 9th and the Buffalo Bills and whether the Ravens can be 1-0 heading to Cincinnati. It's going to happen very, very quickly on the football side. But in the meantime, it's Labor Day weekend, and the only Orioles story, Luke, is are they going to win 40 first or lose 100 first?
Yeah, it's hard to argue with that. I mean, you just look at this record, and look, this isn't surprising. They were bad when they had Manny Machado and Jonathan Scope and Kevin Gausman and Brad Brock and Zach Britton. So
they were bad when Chris Davis was hitting 210.
Yeah, I mean, you just so that part of it's not at all surprising. I mean, I think there was some sentiment to think that maybe they wouldn't continue on a historically terrible pace, but well, they have, and they're currently on pace to lose 116 games, 117 games. They're right around that territory right now. They're clearly going to lose well over 100 games. Barring a really unforeseen finish, they're going to finish worse than the 1988 Orioles. So beyond that historical context and the embarrassment of being on a nationally televised game, and the one prospect you had called up, Cedric Mullins, didn't play against the Yankees on ESPN, you're really stuck to wonder about the future.
They should have put A-Rod and Mendoza in there and just let them run around a little bit, Yeah. Why not? Go Eddie Goodell,
Well, and they were mainly talking about the Yankees anyway, so, I mean, it was fine, whatever. But, I mean, it really is, if you're still watching the Orioles at this point, you're not tuning in to see if they're going to win or lose, because you know that,
chances are 3 in 10 they might win. Now, come on, I got a 30% chance. I mean, it's almost like tuning in as well. It's a double the chance of having Chris Davis hit a hit, literally, right?
Yeah. But really at this point, but in all seriousness, if you're watching this team, if you're engaged with this team at all at this point, you're watching Cedric Mullins. You're looking and hoping to see Dylan Bundy turn it around after what's been an awful 2 months for him. You're looking at Alex Cobb, who has pitched extremely well for the last 2 months, which he's looked like the guy the Orioles thought they were getting since the beginning of July. And you got to go down the list.
And he cleared waivers.
Yeah, right. Which, not surprising when he has 3 years left on his deal. I don't think that's much of a story. But I think you just look at this team right now, and it's really bad, but you're trying to identify anyone who can be someone that's going to help you for the future. And my guess is the lineup that they're trotting out there on a given night, of the regular 9, whatever that is at this point, which is kind of crazy to think about that, because you look at their lineup on a given night and you say, man, who are some of these
I can
guys?
pronounce Villar now. So, yes, I've made it that far 3 weeks into this.
Who, by the way, has actually been a real player. I mean, he's the one established major leaguer that they got in these deadline.
Well, I love to hear all the fanboys talk about all of these guys, and literally, Villar's the only there is. The rest are all might-be's.
And by the way, that's kind of the point, though. You're not looking for, when you're making trades like the Orioles did and you're in the position that they're in, you're not looking for a major league player who only has 1 year of club control left. You're looking for prospects. You're looking for guys that are maybe close to the major leagues, but they're not there yet. And you want them under club control for 5 or 6 years. But right now, you look at the everyday lineup, and there are 2 guys that you really point to and say, yeah, I feel pretty confident that they're going to be here 3 or 4 years from now. Certainly Mancini, he's had a better second half, even though he's had a disappointing season overall. If you ask, if someone asked you, do you think Trey Mancini's on the Orioles 3 years from now, you're going to say yes, unless they trade him. But you know him, and to this point, it's very early, but so far, Cedric Mullins has kind of been as advertised. He's hit over 300. He has a 387, 385 on-base percentage, somewhere in that neighborhood. He's drawn walks. He's shown off speed. He certainly has range in the outfield, even if I do have some questions about the strength of his throwing arm. But he has been as advertised, and that's been really good to see. Now, that doesn't seal your fate that you're going to be fine in rebuilding, but you need more players like Cedric Mullins. So that's been good to see. It's been fun to watch him on a nightly basis, even if this team is not remotely fun to watch on a nightly basis. So it's kind of where we are at this point. I mean, they're going to lose. They lose 72% of the time, or whatever their winning percentage is.
And dropping, by the way. It's trending in the wrong direction after the visit from the Yankees, by the way.
I mean, the funny thing about this season, and you go back to that weird 3 out of 4 series victory in the Bronx, the second weekend of the season. Entering this past weekend, the Orioles had actually been 6-6 against the Yankees, which doesn't sound like much, but for the Orioles, that's really good.
When you've only won 30 and 6 of them came against the Yankees,
right.
it's pretty good.
You look at this division, the AL East, the biggest reason, and I'm not saying it's the only, but one of the biggest factors that slaps you in the face is that the Red Sox have dominated the Orioles this year, and the Yankees, until this weekend where they complete the 4-game sweep, and okay, point taken, that little fun conversation's over, but until this weekend, the Yankees had struggled against the Orioles, and that was kind of the reason why this division had been, 8-9 games was the deficit before this weekend where the Red Sox struggled against Tampa Bay, and the Yankees get the sweep. But the way the Yankees had played the Orioles until this weekend, that had been one of the biggest reasons that you look to and say, well, that's why the Yankees are really behind the 8 ball and trying to catch the Red Sox. So that there was a market correction for that this weekend, but you're really just at a point with the Orioles until the end of the season, and we get more of an idea as far as what the front office is going to look like, what the dugout is going to look like. Really, you're just stuck looking at individual players right now, and there are only a few that are compelling. The rest of the guys are quad A kind of talents and guys that might fill in a gap or two here or there for the next year or two, but certainly aren't guys you're pointing to say, yep, that guy's going to be part of the next winning team for the Orioles. Cedric Mullins, I could see him being part of that. Trey Mancini, I could still see that, even if he has had a down year, even though he's hit better since the All-Star break. But, the Renato Nunez's and guys of that nature, that's a tough sell for me to look at guys like that and say, yeah, I think they'll be part of the Orioles' next wild card or playoff team. There's going to be a lot of losing. There's going to be a lot of misery over the now and over the next year or two at the very least. And in the meantime, you're hoping that you can identify some players that you can build around over the next 4 or 5 years.
Well, when Mullins climbs the wall, that's, and look, I talked to Steve Bumbry last week. It's uncanny how similar to Al Bumbry in some sort of weird left-handed way he is, seeing him run around in center field. Just all of it, I think.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, in fact, Buck Showalter said this was right around when either right when Mullins was promoted or right before. And Mullins has been on the Orioles' radar and has been on Buck's radar as the major league manager for the last 2 years. It was, I believe, the spring of 2016. He came up as just a minor league fill-in player for spring training games. As you know, when they have their travel roster, they go to Dunedin or wherever, Fort Myers. They take some minor leaguers with them that aren't on the 40-man roster, that weren't even invites to spring training. Just those just-in-case fill-in players that come in the 7th and 8th inning. Well, Mullins got on the radar at that point, and he hit well in some Major League spring training games. I believe hit a home run off Craig Kimbrell at one point. And he's someone that, despite coming from a small school, I mean, this was a 13th-round pick out of Campbell University. I mean, this was not an overly highly touted prospect. I mean, he was at a small school. He's not a big kid. He's 5'8", 5'9". He's 175 pounds. But to your point, Buck Showalter even used this comparison. He said that his player comp on him kind of reminded him of Al Bumbry. And sure, I mean, the former Oriole connection, yeah, that makes sense. But I think if you watch Mullins, you watch that he has the ability to work counts. He has some sneaky power. Not that Bumbry hit a ton of home runs, but certainly had some gap power and had some pop in his bat, considering he wasn't a really big guy. Mullins really reminds you of that. My only question with Mullins at this point, other than just the fact that he's a young player and he has to make the adjustments that any young player has to make once they get to the big leagues and have some success and the book's out on you, my question about him is his throwing arm. He doesn't have an overly strong arm, but he covers a heck of a lot of ground in center field. So
kind of like Bumbry.
Yeah, Bumbry. I mean, I think of Mike Devereaux for a 3 or 4 year period where he was an extremely valuable player for the Orioles. So, I mean, that's where Mullins is, and I really like what I see from him. He has a good demeanor. He's someone that Buck has really liked for a couple years. He's someone that Adam Jones clearly took a vested interest in, to the point where Adam willingly moved to right field for him, which, let's face it, there are a lot of players out there that have been in the league a long time. That can be a really awkward situation, and it really speaks to Mullins.
Oh, you remember Juan Bell and Cal Ripken and Manny Alexander.
Yeah, I remember Cal Ripken and Manny Alexander, and I mean, you got to go down the list. For every Mike Bordick situation where Cal moved to third base, there are, and it's not just Cal, I don't want to single him out, there are lots of veteran players who aren't comfortable doing that, or there's at least a headache doing that. But in the case of Jones with Mullins, Jones requested that Mullins' locker right next to him. His locker was next to him in spring training this past year. So it really is a case of this kid has some talent. His character seems to really leave an impression on people. He's got a good mindset. He works. He's been someone who nothing has been given to him. He's earned it by playing well at every level of the minor leagues, and he's now doing it at the major league level, albeit a really small sample. We're not putting him in the Orioles Hall of Fame just yet or anything crazy like that, but he's a guy that at the very least you watch him play over these last couple weeks and you say, you know what, this is looking like he did in the minor leagues, and that's good to see. And he's going to struggle. He's going to go through growing pains, there's no question, but unlike most of the guys that they're trotting out there on a nightly basis at this point, he's someone that you actually watch and say, I could see him being part of the next Orioles playoff team. I could see him being their leadoff hitter. And to your point about Bumbry, this is the first time the Orioles feel like they have a chance to have a traditional leadoff hitter since what, Brian Roberts? So it'll be nice to see him continue to play and hopefully continue to develop. And
come on, Stat Boy, you're going to make a case that there are no traditional leadoff hitters. Come on, we've had this argument many times.
Well, here's my thing. Traditional leadoff hitter, I'm not anti-traditional leadoff hitter. I'm anti-thinking because a guy is fast and can bunt a little bit, that means he's a leadoff hitter. You can have a fast guy at the top of the lineup, but if he has a 305 on-base percentage, that's not a good option in the leadoff spot. But if it's a fast, speedy leadoff guy who has a 390 on-base percentage, then I'll take that any day of the week, because that's a valuable player and that's a table setter for you. So I'm not anti-traditional leadoff hitter. I'm anti-guys that were miscast as a traditional leadoff hitter. And you go back and look over the last 20 years and you'll find plenty of them, not specifically the Orioles, but just in baseball in general. But Mullins, because of his ability to work counts, and we've already seen it in a small sample, we know that, but he's drawn some walks, and he's been able to work some counts, and he's gotten on base, and that's what you want out of a leadoff hitter, not just the guy who looks like he's a leadoff hitter because he has some speed.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke out on Twitter and Luke at WNST.net. I'm going to go through all of our sponsors here because we are in an amazing position here for football season because of our great sponsors. I want to give a shout out to Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. I got the Chicken Palooza going on. It's through the 31st if you want to win chicken for a year, but the chicken tastes just as good in September, as does the coffee and the Kona blend that I have in my Cole Roofing mug here on our WNSTV channel and our YouTube, WNSTV at home, so you can view. But we're out of Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. I got the coffee always brewing here, and you guys know I pick up a $5 chicken box. Be sure Johns Hopkins Children's Center is involved as well. Portion of all the proceeds from Chicken Palooza, keep it right here over at Johns Hopkins, where my wife and I walked on the Children's Center side many, many times during her time down at Johns Hopkins. So way to go, Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. I was down at Pizza John's over the weekend in Essex, giving them some love as well. I've had this problem between the pizzas and the subs and the raviolis at this point. I've been a little sub-centric lately, but I have eaten the pizza. I just bring that home. Pizza John's, 50 years. They've been doing it down at Back River Neck Road. Make sure you're getting down there, checking them out, and saying hello as well. The Maryland Jockey Club, our partner, they bring the morning newspaper your way each and every morning. They're racing at Timonium. They'll be down at Laurel again next week, getting ready for football season. They got the DeFrancis Dash coming up in the middle of the month, and the Maryland Million happening the weekend of October the 20th. You can learn more on the front of our website by clicking on the Laurel Park entries, now attached in the front of WNST.net, as well as in our morning newspaper, also brought to you by Planet fitness. Luke, on the Orioles side of things here, as far as watching the rest of the month and where the maneuvers will be, we're getting up on the end of the month here. There'll be a shocking move somewhere. Somebody's going to clear waivers and somebody's going to get picked up here. It always happens, right? There's sort of this second life we never sort of account for at 4 o'clock on July 31st, right?
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I would have thought that, but now you look, I mean, they jettisoned Danny Valencia. He was someone that I thought could be an August deal, and they couldn't find a taker. So it kind of just shows, Mark Trumbo looks like he's not going to play the rest of the year. So I think you're going to have to try to move him in the offseason, and I think that's something they're going to attempt to do to hopefully free up either first base or DH, whichever one Chris Davis isn't occupying, for Trey Mancini, because I think you need to get Mancini out of the outfield. But I think you look, and you mentioned Alex Cobb a few moments ago as far as a player that has been put through waivers. I don't see him going anywhere with 3 years left on his deal, but I think maybe, just maybe, and I'm not holding my breath, is Cashner someone that a playoff contender that maybe their number 4, number 5 starter goes down or isn't pitching effectively? Is he someone, because he's only under contract next year, so you're not talking about a huge financial commitment for him. Is he someone that could be moved? Maybe. Do I think you're getting anything of significance for him? No. So, I mean, there's always the possibility. I mean, it's been quiet on the Adam Jones front. It doesn't seem like there's traction for him to waive his 10-5 rights and accept a trade. So until we hear different on that, I'm going to assume that doesn't happen. Even though I've said all along from the time that he wouldn't do it at the end of July that it was still a possibility. So just keep that in the back of your mind. But I think for the most part, you kind of just look at this team and there just aren't a lot of pieces that are attractive to other organizations. And I mean, it's not a shocker when you're approaching 100 wins and it's not even September yet. So I think there's much more a case of they're just in evaluation mode at this point.
You said 100 wins. You meant losses. But
losses.
I'm going all Animal House. I'm like, was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? Hell no. I mean, we've just watched a lot of bad baseball, and on a daily basis, I don't know what to say about this. And I don't know, and I'm honestly wondering what I'm going to be saying in May, June, and July of next year as, 9 and 16 begats 12 and 26, and because that's where this is going next year, too. And I think that is the ultimate sin of all of this, is that at a time where they had sort of built it back up again, they're just going to burn it down over the next couple of years because no one cares. I mean, you care, I care, we talk, but if we sat here and talked Oriole baseball all day, no one would be listening. And, those clowns over 105.7, I don't know what they're going to do as the flagship and all of that over the next 3 years. I don't know what there is to say about this, because behind all of it is this incredible incompetence of the organization to ever allow it to get to this point that they had to torch it. And now that it's torched, dude. And unless you and I are going to Bowie, I don't know what we're doing with our Tuesday night.
Well, I mean, part of this, and to your point as far as, people just aren't engaged right now. People care, but no one's watching a team that's that bad. I mean, no one's going out on a Sunday night to watch the Orioles get their asses kicked by the Yankees right now. I mean, it's just the truth. And it'd be the same way if the Ravens were 1-15 this year.
Well, there used to be a time where you would want to go pay and see Aaron Judge play, or Giancarlo Stanton play, or Max Scherzer pitch, or, whatever. In my day, it was Nolan Ryan or whatever, but it was never this worst season in the history of the organization, knowing what's over the hills just as ugly. We never had that. I mean, even with the bad teams, with the Orioles and disappointing years and injured, riddled years or whatever, you never felt like the organization was down the cliff until Angelos took over and until this century. And we recognize this. We know what it is. People going away, it's just such a disturbing thing. You say they care, but they care enough that, wake me in 2021 when it matters again. That's a long time from now. I
mean, I hear what you're saying, but it's like that everywhere. No one supports bad base or bad teams.
Doesn't make it easy for us to talk about 365 days a year, that's for sure.
Right. Well, but my point is, I think people care. But like, what do you want them to do? I mean, people aren't going out and spending money to watch a terrible product. I mean, it's just like you're not watching a bad TV show. You're not spending money on a movie that you heard is really, really terrible. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast. And maybe that's different in 2018 than it was 30 years ago, but go look at the Orioles' attendance in 1988. It wasn't very good. I mean, we talk about Fantastic Fan Night, and that was a great moment, but their attendance was very comparable to what it is this year. I mean, it's just the truth. No one wants to watch bad teams, and I'd say this much, I don't want to disagree with you entirely, but I don't think there was a whole lot of hope in 1988 when the Orioles started 0-21, and then you saw what happened in 89. I'm not predicting that for the Orioles right now by any stretch of the imagination, but when you're in the abyss, it feels really, really dark and helpless and hopeless. But once you step out of it and then you look back at it, you don't view it quite in the same context. In the same way that earlier this year, we were talking with reverence about the 1988 Orioles. Well, there's nothing sentimental about it at the time. So
I think back about Ozzie Peraza and Jay Tibbs in a different light these days.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
poor Dave
you think
Schmidt.
about it in the same way that we'll look back at this because the Orioles will be good again at some point.
I might not remember these guys' names, to be honest with you.
Well, but you'll remember. But someone will bring up Renato Nunez or
they will.
Sean Gilmartin, or just go down the list.
I'm going to go with Jimmy Yacobonis. He's my favorite when it's a great name.
Yacobonis,
Nestor Cortez. How about Nestor Cortez being a key contributor to the early part of this?
Yeah. I mean, you'll go down the list, and there will be some names.
They had to bring a Nestor in to get this bad,
There will be, in the same way that I was talking with someone in the press box about 2 weeks ago. We were talking about some of the random names from 98 through 2011, and Fernando Lunar and Mike Kincaid, and just got to go down the list of different guys, and it's amazing what memories come back when you hear a name that you never would have thought of again the rest of your life. But that's where the Orioles are right now, and no one wants to watch it. It's not fun. It's embarrassing. It's terrible baseball. It's sad to see people such as Adam Jones and Buck Showalter, who have so many great memories attached to them, now attached to this. And I don't think it ruins their legacies by any stretch, but it's really painful to watch it and see what this has become. And I used this analogy with you a little bit earlier in the season. It's kind of like that movie franchise that ended up being really good kind of out of nowhere, but now they're on their 6th or 7th sequel, and maybe 1 or 2 original cast members are left, and you're just saying, why are they still doing this? And that's kind of what the Orioles of 2018 were. They burned it down now. And
we get a whole weekend of that with the Royals, right? I mean, except they had a parade there, right? But, what it used to be and what's left, this Orioles-Royals weekend will be a telltale of that, right? It's almost like a throwback to 2010 or something.
It's going to be the Bobby Witt Jr. Cup. Who the guy who many people think will be the first pick in the 2019 amateur draft. These are the two teams, and the Orioles have opened up a little bit of a lead here. I say lead because we're talking about being worse, but they've opened up a little bit of a lead over the Kansas City in that regard for the number 1 pick. And, we'll see the Bobby Witt Jr. Cup and reminisce about 4 years ago, and just it's a reminder of how fleeting it can be. I mean, you can have something that is good for quite a while, and the Orioles had that, the Royals had that, and now it's not. And at least the Royals, to your point, did have the satisfaction of winning a World Series. The Orioles did not do that, and both teams now are left to kind of look at the few pieces that are left from that glory and see a lot of bad pieces and a lot of unknown pieces now that you're hoping will turn into something good at some point down the road. But definitely going to be a strange weekend in Kansas City, and amazing to think 4 years ago these two teams were playing for the right to go to the World Series, and now they're the 2 worst teams in baseball. And like I said, any enthusiasm to try to see if you can get that number 1 overall pick, and maybe it is Bobby Witt Jr. and So we'll have the
it's crazy, man. You mentioned like all these Yakka bonuses and these old names or whatever. I haven't heard Bobby Witt's name in forever, until his son came along and we're bad enough to have the number one pick. And then I had to go back and look. He had a way better career than I remember him having. I remember him being on my Stratomatic team back in the 80s and then into the 90s when I was back when I was a real media member, when he was with Oakland and Texas and seeing him in the Oriole visiting clubhouse back in the day, part of those Johnny Oates teams after he left here and all that. Sort of the consummate number 4 starter, kind of, sort of, right?
Yeah, well, and if you think about it, it kind of makes sense. And we do this with a lot of players in any sport. There are a lot of guys that you tend to think aren't very good, but they hang around for a long time. And there's a reason for that, because they're actually better than you think.
Bobby Witt, 16 years in the big leagues, man.
Yeah, look, he's not Hall of Fame or Hall of Very Good, but he was good enough to hang around a long time. So, his son is a high school shortstop. By most accounts, and again, we have a whole year to go almost for this, so let's keep that in mind, but is considered
the phenom.
special kind of talent, has special power for, a 17-year-old at this point. We'll see what a year from now brings, but the Orioles are, right now, competing with the Kansas City Royals.
Dude, if the Ravens start 1-6, we'll be talking draft on, October 10th. So there's no harm in previewing Bobby Witt Jr., knowing, what's at the end of this this rainbow? Is there a pot of gold after finishing a season 44 and 118 or whatever the hell this is going to be?
Well, the pot of gold needs to be that you hit on those draft picks. You hit on the first overall pick. You hit on the first pick of the second round. It's as much as we talk about the Astros and the Cubs and the Braves and the Phillies, look at what they did with their farm systems. This is the opportunity that the Orioles have, and it's a glass half full kind of way of looking at it. And look, there's very few things to be optimistic about. We know that. Everyone understands that. But if you are going to get some early draft picks and you are finally going to invest money in the international market and sign international talent, that's how you build yourself back up. The cupboard isn't completely bare in their minor league system right now, but it is at least a year or two away. So in the meantime, you trot out a bunch of quad A players, a bunch of journeymen. You're going to be bad. Maybe they won't lose 115 games next year, because I think the mathematical probability of that is probably tough to duplicate that. You kind of win 60 games by accident next year or something like that. But they're going to be bad. We know that. But you hope that Cedric Mullins and a year from now maybe Austin Hayes and Yusniel Diaz and Dean Kramer, the pitcher they got from the Dodgers, has pitched really well at Double-A Bowie. He's looked really good. You're hoping some of these guys start breaking through and they get to Baltimore, and they're going to take their lumps for a while here, just like Matt Wieters did and Adam Jones did and Nick Markakis did, and they go down the list. But then all of a sudden 2012 came around and they weren't bad anymore, and you hope you're going to have some kind of process that plays out in a similar way, except maybe better, maybe in a way that you can sustain success even longer. But it's going to take some time. Even a best-case scenario, I can't see this team next year or the year after that being competitive. You're hoping maybe by 2021, maybe you're in a position where you're decent again and you're ascending and you're trending in the right direction. But it has, when you're rebuilding, it has to get worse before it gets better. That's just the way it works. You don't rebuild and suddenly you're better. So this is where the Orioles are right now. They were terrible early in the season. They're worse now in terms of talent on paper and in terms of wins and losses. And it's, you hope it's maybe a touch better by the end of next year, and it gets better than that after the year after that, and then maybe the year after that, maybe they're in a position where they're starting to contend and make some noise for a wild card again. But a lot has to go right, and they need to make a lot of good decisions, and it's going to start with, as soon as the season ends, what the heck is happening with Dan Duquette and Buck Showalter, and more specifically, who's going to run the baseball ops? Who's going to be the manager in the dugout leading what's going to be a young, overmatched team? And how are you going to cultivate that kind of culture that needs to be in place to win again?
The offseason will be a lot more interesting than the next month of baseball.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
No question. Right now, I'm absolutely in the mode, other than watching Cedric Mullins 4 at-bats every night, other than hoping and to see Dylan Bundy turn things around as he's really, really struggled the last couple months, other than watching guys like Cody Carroll and Tanner Scott in the bullpen who aren't really getting consistent results whatsoever right now, but you know that they have good arms and you know that they're talented pitchers, even if they're not having that success yet. Other than watching a handful of guys like that, there's nothing compelling about these next 5 weeks. It's about where you're going to rank among the worst teams of all time. I mean, they're going to be somewhere in that top 10, and they might be in the top 5 even when it's all said and done. But you're hoping in the midst of all that losing that Cedric Mullins is getting some value out of these last 5 weeks, and that Cody Carroll and Tanner Scott are getting some value. And you hope that you can get Dylan Bundy straightened out. You hope that Alex Cobb continues to pitch well, to be kind of a leader of the pitching staff, or to be a trade chip at some point in the next year and a half. So, you're hoping for those things, and there's a lot of filler in between that doesn't really have much meaning and is really, really bad baseball. And that's just the Orioles' reality right now. And it's a shame it got to this point, but this is where they are.
And football begins next weekend, and college football begins this week. Luke at WNST.net and Baltimore Luke on Twitter. He'll be on the backfields with the Ravens. He'll be monitoring the Orioles. This Terps mess, they're playing football this week at FedEx against Texas. You can find all of our interviews and all the previews for all this stuff out in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. I am a very available individual. I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, streaming live right here on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We're continuing the conversation. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.